Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to go over literal equations. Now, literal equations are just solving for a specific variable in equations involving multiple variables. So you'll have an equation, you'll have multiple variables in it, and you're going to pick one of the variables, or they're going to pick one of the variables for you, and you're going to solve for that. Now, this is used a lot in geometry and in science, where you know, say, the volume of something, but you don't know one of the other variables for like a large section of data. And what you'll do is you'll solve for that variable that you don't know, or that, the variable that you don't know. And now you've got it where you can just take all the other numbers and plug them into the calculator and you get that number back, right? It's called being calculator ready. So that's what we're doing here, is we're gonna take these formulas, and a lot of times it's used in these formulas, and solve for the variable that they want us to have. So we're just gonna kind of get into it. All this is taking what you've already learned about solving equations and saying, okay, now apply it where there's a whole bunch of variables inside of it, is really all it is. So area of a rectangle, area equals length times width. We want to solve for W. When we look at this, it's just like a normal equation. A equals length times width. So you're going to undo these operations. Use the opposite operation to get rid of the things that you want to get rid of. So we want the W all by itself, so you're going to undo the multiplication here. So you divide. Divide both sides by L. So what you end up with is these two things canceling each other out, because L divided by L gets you 1, 1 times any number is that number back. So we're going to end up with W on this side equals the area divided by the length. And this is one of the very simple ones, but it's a good starting point for you to kind of see what's going on. Yes, I can move this formula around so that I pick which variable I want to have solved for. So W equals the area divided by the length. So if we had the area and we had the length, we could find what W is. That's all we're setting up here. This is what's going on inside of literal equations. Very straightforward. Undo the operation so that you have the one variable by itself. Isolate the variable you're looking for. So if we had area of a triangle, area equals 1/2 base times height. Solve for H. And a lot of times you'll know which one you're trying to solve for. They'll tell you, or you'll look and go, well, I have all this information, I need this information. So you'll know what you're looking for. So here, area equals 1/2 base times height. Well, first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of this 1/2. So we can clear the fraction, so we're going to multiply both sides by 2. So multiply by 2, multiply by 2. And what will happen is this and this will clear out. So that leaves us with 2a equals base times height. Well, if we're solving for h, base times height, divide by the b. That'll clear that out. Divide by base, divide here, cancels that out, and now you have your equation. H equals 2 times the area divided by the base. So if I had the area and the base, I could find my height. And we could have done this the other way and solved for b. So we know what b was. Just depends on what you're looking for. Right? They said h, so that's what we solved for. Area of a circle, area equals pi r squared, solve for r. Okay, well, it's the same thing. Undo orders of operations. Notice, this is pi r squared. When you go and undo orders of operations, you've got to work backwards through those orders of operations. So we deal with this multiplication, then we're going to deal with this exponent. So pi times r squared, undo multiplication, we're going to divide by pi on both sides. That'll cancel this out, and that leaves us with a over pi equals r squared. So a over pi equals r squared. Now you gotta understand how to undo the squaring of something. You take the square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides to undo the squaring of r. So we're going to take the square root of this whole thing on this side, and you'll do the same thing over here. All right? So you end up with the square root of a over pi equals r. So you'll end up with this, the square root a over pi equals r. Because square rooting undoes squaring. And that's how that works. Okay? You're going to see this. You'll see this in the future. You'll see it later in problems today, and then you're going to see it in geometry and algebra 2 for sure. All right? So be aware of it. Understand how it works. All right? And all I'm doing here is giving you examples of how this goes through and how to do these formulas, because a lot of this is used within these formulas. So circumference equals 2 pi r, solve for pi. So we want to know what pi is. So look, multiplication, 2 times pi times r. All right? The first thing that I would do with this is I'm actually going to rearrange this problem a little bit. So 2r pi. Because of the commutative property, I can reorder this. It's all multiplication, so I get to do that. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to divide by 2r. This is being multiplied times this. That's your associative property. You get to actually group those together. So I'm going to divide by this little grouping that I have right here, 2r. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now this will cancel this out, and it leaves me with circumference over 2r equals pi. And that's the way that kind of works out. Commutative associative properties, if you know them, you know how they work, this makes this a lot easier. All right? Let's do this one. Volume of rectangular prism. V equals length times width times height, solve for h. It's the same thing as what we just did right here. Look, because it's all multiplication, I can group those two things together. Now, I can divide by both as a group on both sides. Okay? This cancels this out. You get V over length times width, so volume over length times width equals height. And now you could have solved for any one of those variables, and it would have ended up being basically the same thing. So volume over length times width equals height, and you have a good formula for you to solve for h. Right? Surface area of a prism, solve for h. Now it's starting to get a little bit more complicated. You have a few other things involved, but it's still the same process. All right? Draw your line, locate the variable that you wanted to solve for. So we want to solve for h. So undo the thing that's furthest away from it. Well, that's multiplication. This is plus 2b, so we're going to add the inverse of 2b, or subtract 2b. I'm going to just subtract 2b from both sides, make it look a little bit cleaner. Okay, so minus 2b. All right, that leaves me with ph over here equals s minus 2b. Now, we're still solving for h. Well, p times h, we're going to divide. Divide by p, divide by p. That leaves you with s minus 2b over p equals h. And now you know you can solve for h. Find out what h is. Plug in b, plug in s, plug in p, and now just solve and you'll have your h. Okay? Y equals mx plus b. This is a one that you're going to see. I guarantee you will see this. All right. solve for M. So we want to solve for M. Same thing. Subtract b from both sides. Okay? That cancels that out. You end up with y minus b equals m times x. Now, divide by x because that's being multiplied. Divide by x, cancels out. You end up with m equals y minus b over x equals m. And guys, m is your slope. Okay? Guys, you can do this. Don't overthink it. Work through it very carefully, and you're going to be just fine. Okay? If you need any help, come let me know.